The wind carried the smell of death across the Wyoming snow. Ethan Morrison did not smell it at first. He was too focused on the fence line, the repetitive work that had consumed 5 years of his life. Check the posts, tighten the wire, move to the next section, repeat. The monotony was a mercy. It kept his mind from wandering to places he could not afford to go. He was 36 years old, though his eyes belonged to a much older man. The kind of eyes that had seen too much and remembered everything. Broad shoulders carried the weight of a body built for labor and war. His hands were callous, scarred, permanently stained by the work of survival. The beard on his face was thick and unkempt, shot through with premature gray. He wore the same clothes he had worn for weeks, a heavy wool coat, leather gloves with holes in the fingers, boots that had walked 1,000 miles. The mountains rose behind him like silent sentinels. They had watched him build this life such as it was. A cabin, a fence, a small herd of cattle that somehow survived each brutal winter. This was existence, not living. But existence was enough, it had to be. His horse, a sturdy bay mare named Patience, stopped without warning. Ethan looked up from the fence post he had been examining. The mare's ears were pinned back, her nostrils flaring. She smelled something he could not. Then the wind shifted and he smelled it too. Blood, fresh blood on clean snow. The soldier in him woke instantly. His right hand moved to the Springfield rifle strapped to his saddle fingers, wrapping around the familiar wood and steel. He had not fired this weapon in 5 years. Not since he left the cavalry. Not since he swore he would never kill again. But the hand remembered. The body remembered. Ethan dismounted slowly, rifle now cradled in both arms. His eyes scanned the tree line, looking for movement, for threat, for anything that did not belong in this frozen wilderness. The pines stood motionless. The sky was the color of old bruises, heavy with the promise of more snow. He saw the blood trail first, dark crimson against impossible white. It led from the trees toward a small clearing, droplets becoming smears, smears becoming pools. Someone had been hurt badly. Someone had been dragged or crawled, leaving desperation in their wake. Ethan followed the trail. His boots crunched in the deep powder. Each step was deliberate, measured. He kept the rifle ready, finger near the trigger, but not on it. Not yet. The blood was still bright red, which meant it was fresh. Which meant whoever had lost it might still be alive. Which meant whoever had spilled it might still be nearby. The body lay at the base of a massive pine tree, half buried in snow. At first, Ethan thought it was already dead. The stillness was too complete, too final. But then he saw the faint rise and fall of the chest, saw the thin mist of breath escaping into the cold air. Alive. Barely. He approached carefully, rifle still raised. This could be a trap, wounded bait to draw in the unwary. He had seen that tactic before in the war, seen men die because they let compassion override caution. But when he got close enough to see the face, all thoughts of tactics fled. It was a woman, Chinese, or perhaps part Chinese. It was hard to tell beneath the damage. Her face was a canvas of violins. Both eyes were swollen, nearly shut, the skin around them purple and black. Her nose was broken, blood crusted beneath it and across her lips. A deep cut split her left eyebrow, still seeping. Her cheekbone looked wrong, pushed inward, possibly fractured. Ethan knelt beside her, setting the rifle within easy reach. He pulled off one glove and pressed 2 fingers against her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, weak and rapid, but there. He looked at her more carefully now, cataloging injuries with the cold efficiency the Army had taught him. Her clothing was expensive. A long black wool coat, well-tailored, now torn and soaked with melting snow. Beneath it, a dark shirt and trousers. Not the dress of a proper frontier woman. The dress of someone who rode hard and traveled light. A gun belt circled her waist. Ethan's eyes locked on it. The belt itself was beautiful hand-tooled leather with intricate patterns worked into it. The holster held a Colt revolver, the grip visible above the leather. He reached for it, carefully drew the weapon free. It was warm. She had fired it recently. The barrel still held the faint smell of burned powder. He checked the cylinder. 3 rounds fired, 3 remaining. Ethan looked at the gun more closely. It was a work of art. The metal was engraved with delicate patterns, flowers and curves that seemed almost too beautiful for an instrument of death. Near the base of the grip, worked into the steel itself, was the image of a dragon. Chinese-style serpentine breathing, stylized flames. Themselves. Her left hand was swollen themselves. Her left hand was swollen, possibly broken. Blood seeped through her shirt on the right side, suggesting broken ribs or worse. Her skin was ice cold to the touch, her lips tinged blue. Hypothermia. She was dying of cold as much as from the beating. Ethan sat back on his heels, looking at this broken woman in the snow. Every instinct he possessed screamed at him to walk away. She was trouble. Everything about her said it. The gun, the expensive clothes, the fact that someone had beaten her nearly to death and left her here to freeze. Trouble he did not need. Trouble he had spent 5 years avoiding. He could leave her, ride back to his cabin, forget he had seen anything. She would be dead within the hour, taken by the cold. No one would ever know he had been here, but he would know. The wind picked up, howling through the pines. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier. A blizzard was coming. He could feel it in his bones. And in that moment, kneeling in the snow beside a dying stranger, Ethan Morrison saw another face. Not this woman's. His wife's. Anna. She had died 5 years ago. Fever had taken her in 3 days, burning her up from the inside while he watched helplessly. Their son Samuel had followed her a day later. 4 years old, crying for his mother, for the pain to stop. Ethan had sat by their bedsides, holding their hands, unable to do anything, unable to save them. The doctor had come too late. By the time he arrived with medicine, they were already gone. Ethan blinked, forcing the memory away. His jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. He would not let another person die. Not when he could prevent it. Not again. He stood, retrieved his rifle, then bent and carefully lifted the woman into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her body frail beneath the heavy coat. Her head lolled against his shoulder. A soft moan escaped her lips, the first sound she had made. Ethan carried her to his horse. Patience shifted nervously, smelling the blood, but she held steady. Good mare. He arranged the woman across the saddle in front of him, holding her in place with one arm while guiding the horse with the other. The rifle he slung across his back. The ride home took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. The snow fell harder with each passing moment, the wind cutting through his coat like knives. The woman did not move, did not make a sound. He kept checking to make sure she was still breathing. She was. Barely. The cabin appeared through the white curtain of snow like a blessing. It was small, sturdy, built with his own hands from logs he had cut and hauled himself. Smoke rose from the stone chimney. The windows glowed with firelight. Home. For 5 years, this place had been his sanctuary, his prison, the walls he had built to keep the world out. And now he was bringing the world inside. Ethan dismounted, pulling the woman down with him. He kicked open the cabin door and carried her inside, snow swirling in behind them. The warmth hit him like a physical thing after the bitter cold. He laid her on the bed near the fireplace. His bed, the only bed, where Anna had died, where he had not slept in 5 years, preferring the floor or a chair by the fire. The woman looked impossibly small on it, now dwarfed by the heavy quilts. Ethan moved quickly. He had done this before. Treated wounded men in the war, cleaned injuries, stitched flesh, tried to save lives. Sometimes he succeeded. Often he failed. He could not fail now. First, warmth. Her body temperature was dangerously low. He stoked the fire until it roared, filling the cabin with heat and orange light. Then he turned to her clothes. They had to come off. Wet fabric would kill her as surely as the cold. Ethan cut away the coat with his hunting knife, then the shirt beneath. He worked with clinical efficiency, eyes focused on the task, not the person. This was a body, a patient, nothing more. Her torso was a map of violence. Bruises covered her ribs, her stomach, her shoulders. Dark purple marks in the shape of boot prints. She had been kicked repeatedly, savagely. Her right side showed the worst of it, the flesh there swollen and discolored. Broken ribs, at least 2, maybe more. He cut away the rest of her clothes, leaving only her undergarments. Then he wrapped her in every blanket he owned, piling them on until only her face was visible. He placed hot stones from the fire wrapped in cloth near her feet and sides. Not touching her skin directly, that would cause more damage. Slowly, he had to warm her slowly. While he waited, Ethan prepared supplies. Clean water, cloth for bandages, whiskey for cleaning wounds. Ethan stitched the eyebrow cut with small, careful stitches. His hands were steady despite the tension in his chest. The woman did not wake, did not flinch. She was too far gone for that. He examined her hand next. 3 fingers were badly swollen. He set them as best he could, binding them together with splints made from thin pieces of wood. She would not like how crooked they healed, but at least they would heal. The ribs he could do nothing about except bind them, wrapping cloth tight around her torso to keep the bones from moving. She gasped when he lifted her to do this, a small sound of pain, but her eyes did not open. Finally, he turned to the gun. It lay on the table where he had placed it, the dragon seeming to watch him in the firelight. Ethan picked it up, turned it over in his hands. It was a beautiful weapon. Too beautiful. The kind of gun you kept because it meant something. He cleaned it methodically, removed the spent casings, wiped down the barrel and cylinder, oiled the moving parts, reloaded it with fresh cartridges from his own supply. Then he set it on the small table beside the bed, within easy reach. If she woke, she would want it, would need to know it was there. Ethan pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. The rifle rested across his lap. He stared into the fire, listening to the storm building outside. Wind screamed around the cabin walls. Snow piled against the windows. They were sealed in now. No one could come. No one could leave. Just him and this stranger who might die before morning. The hours crawled past. Ethan did not sleep. He watched the woman's chest rise and fall, counting breaths. Every 10 minutes he checked her pulse, monitored her temperature, added wood to the fire. Sometime after midnight, she began to shiver. Violent tremors that shook the entire bed. Ethan placed more hot stones near her, piled on another blanket. The shivering was good, he told himself. It meant her body was fighting. Trying to warm itself, she moaned a sound of pure distress. Her head turned back and forth on the pillow. Delirium. Ethan leaned closer, trying to hear what she was saying. Words in English barely whispered. Broken fragments. The children. Have to save the children. A pause. More moaning. Please, not the children. Then something in another language. Chinese, perhaps. He did not understand it. Her hand emerged from beneath the blankets, reaching for something that was not there. Ethan caught it, gently held it. Her fingers were so cold still, like ice. You are safe, he said quietly, not knowing if she could hear, not knowing if it mattered. You are safe here. The hand relaxed slightly in his grip. The moaning quieted. Ethan held her hand until the shivering subsided, until her breathing evened out, until she fell into something that looked like real sleep instead of unconsciousness. Then he released her hand and returned to his chair. Dawn came, slowly, gray light seeping through the frost-covered windows. The storm had not stopped. If anything, it had grown worse. Snow was piled 3 feet high against the cabin door. Drifts reached halfway up the walls. No one was going anywhere. Not for days. Ethan made coffee, strong and bitter. He ate cold cornbread from the day before. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but he did not sleep. Could not sleep. The woman had not moved since the shivering stopped. Her breathing was stronger now, deeper. Color had returned to her lips just barely. The bluish tinge was fading. She would live. Probably. Ethan sat by the fire drinking his coffee, staring at nothing. His mind was empty, numb. He had spent 5 years perfecting this numbness. It was easier than feeling. But now, looking at this stranger in his bed, he felt something stirring. Something he had thought dead. Purpose. He had saved a life. For the first time in 5 years, he had done something that mattered. It was a dangerous feeling. The day passed in silence and snow. Ethan checked the woman's wounds, changed her bandages, made sure the fire stayed high. She slept on her body, doing the hard work of healing. He found her belongings near the door where he had dropped them. The black coat still damp, the torn shirt and trousers. He laid them out to dry by the fire. In the coat pocket he found money, $200 in bills carefully folded, a small fortune, more than most people saw in a year, and a photograph. Ethan held it up to the light. It showed a younger version of the woman standing beside an older man, Chinese, dignified, wearing fine clothes. Her father, perhaps. They stood in front of a building with Chinese characters on the sign. The woman in the photo was smiling, young, unburdened, not like now. Ethan tucked the photo and money back into the coat pocket. Her belongings, not his to examine, but the gun stayed on the bedside table. that he would keep close. Night fell again. The storm continued its assault. Ethan made soup from dried meat and vegetables, filling the cabin with savory smells. He ate a bowl, set another aside for the woman when she woke. If she woke. He was dozing in his chair when he heard it, a sound so soft he almost missed it beneath the wind. Movement. Fabric shifting. Ethan's eyes snapped open. His hand went to the rifle leaning against his chair. The woman was awake. She sat up slowly, one hand pressed to her bandaged ribs. Her eyes were open, or as open as the swelling allowed. They were dark brown, almost black, and they swept the room with a cold assessment of someone trained to evaluate threats. She saw the door, the windows, the exits. She saw him. Her hands shot out toward the bedside table, toward the gun. Ethan did not move, did not raise the rifle. He simply watched as her fingers closed around the Colt as she lifted it with practiced ease despite the injured hand. The barrel swung toward him, steady, unwavering. For a long moment they stared at each other across 10 feet of cabin floor. A woman with a gun pointed at his chest, a man with a rifle across his lap. Her voice when it came was hoarse, raw, like gravel scraping. "Where am I?" Ethan met her eyes. He saw no gratitude there, no relief, only wariness in the cold calculation of a survivor. "My home," he said quietly, "about 15 miles from the nearest town." "Who are you?" "Ethan Morrison." The gun did not lower. Her finger rested on the trigger, not quite pulling, but ready. "Why am I here?" "I found you in the snow yesterday. You were dying." He paused. "I brought you back, treated your wounds." Her eyes flicked down to her bund, taking in the blankets, the bandages, the splinted fingers. Understanding dawned, followed immediately by tension. "You undressed me. Your clothes were frozen. You would have died of cold." His voice remained calm, matter of fact. "I have seen wounded soldiers before. I know how to treat injuries without dishonoring the patient." She studied his face for a long time, looking for lies, for deception, for the threat that every man represented. Ethan did not look away. He had nothing to hide. Finally, her eyes moved to the rifle across his lap, then back to his face. "You gave me my gun back," she said. It was not a question, but there was confusion in it. "Loaded. It is yours, a weapon that fine deserves respect." He paused. "And so do you." Another long silence. The wind howled outside. The fire crackled. Slowly, very slowly, the woman lowered the gun, not holstering it, just lowering it to rest on her lap, still ready. "Thank you," she said. The words sounded unfamiliar in her mouth, like she did not say them often. Ethan nodded. "Are you hungry?" She blinked as if the question surprised her, then nodded. He stood moving slowly so as not to spook her and retrieved the bowl of soup he had set aside. He placed it on the bedside table well within her reach but not too close, giving her space. "It is not much, but it is warm." She picked up the bowl with her good hand, sipped carefully. Her eyes closed for just a moment. When they opened again, some of the hardness had softened, just barely. "How long was I unconscious?" "Since yesterday afternoon, about a day and a half." "The storm?" "Still going. We are sealed in. No one is coming. No one is leaving." Fear flashed across her face, quickly suppressed. But Ethan had seen it. "You are safe here," he said again, meaning it. "I will not hurt you, and I will not let anyone else hurt you either." She looked at him for a long time, then nodded once. "Mom, my name is Grace," she said. "Grace Chen." Grace, he tested the name. It fit her somehow, despite the violence written on her body. "Rest, eat. We can talk more when you are stronger." He turned to return to his chair, giving her privacy, but her voice stopped him. "Why?" Ethan looked back. "Why what?" "Why did you save me? You do not know me. I could be anyone, a criminal, a murderer." Her eyes were sharp despite the pain. "Why risk it?" Ethan was silent for a moment. Then he looked at the photograph on the wall. Anna and Samuel frozen in time, smiling at a camera 5 years ago. "Because I have seen enough people die," he said quietly, "and I am tired of it." He sat back down in his chair. Grace ate her soup in silence, watching him. The gun never left her lap. But she was eating. She was awake. She was alive. That was enough. The next day, Grace was strong enough to stand. Ethan heard her moving around while he was outside, checking on the livestock in the barn. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a world buried in white. Drifts higher than a man's head, the cold so sharp it burned the lungs. When he returned to the cabin, she was on her feet, leaning heavily against the wall for support. She had dressed herself in her dried clothes, though they hung loose on her thin frame. The gun belt was strapped around her waist. The Colt rested in its holster. She looked at him as he entered, snow falling from his coat. Her stance was defensive, ready to move, despite the obvious pain. Ethan closed the door, stamped the snow from his boots. He said nothing about her being up. It was her choice. "You are a soldier," she said, not a question. "Or you were." Ethan hung his coat by the door. "Cavalry, discharged 5 years ago." "Why did you leave?" He looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman with bruises on her face and a gun on her hip. This stranger who had crashed into his isolated world. He could lie, could give her the simple answer, but something in her eyes told him she would know. She had the look of someone who had seen most, told lies, lived lies. "I refused an order," he said, "to burn a village, to kill people who had done nothing wrong." He paused. "My commanding officer disagreed. He thought mercy was weakness." Grace's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps. "What was his name, your commanding officer?" "Sergeant Malcolm Corbin." The color drained from Grace's face. She swayed, caught herself against the wall. The hand on her gun tightened. Ethan stepped forward instinctively. "Are you all right?" "Corbin," she whispered. "You knew Malcolm Corbin." The way she said the name sent ice down Ethan's spine. He had not heard it spoken in years, had tried to forget it. "You know him," Ethan said. It was not a question. Grace laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. "Know him, I worked for him. For 2 years I was his enforcer, his weapon, his property." She looked at Ethan with eyes that had seen too much. "Malcolm Corbin is the man who did this to me," she said, gesturing to her battered face. "And he is the man who will come looking for me." The world seemed to tilt. Ethan stared at this woman, pieces clicking into place. The expensive gun, the money, the beaten body left in the snow to die. "Tell me," he said, and Grace did. She spoke in a flat, emotionless voice, telling him about her father, a merchant in San Francisco who died when she was 20, about losing everything to a dishonest manager, about Malcolm Corbin appearing like a savior, offering protection, offering work, about realizing too late what that work would be. "I collected debts," she said, "intimidated rivals. And yes, sometimes I killed people." She met Ethan's eyes. "I am not innocent, Ethan Morrison. I have blood on my hands." Ethan said nothing, just listened. "But 2 months ago I found something. A ledger, hidden in Corbin's office." Her voice hardened. "Records of every crime, every deal, every piece of corruption, and at the back a list." She paused, her jaw clenching. 47 children, bought and sold like cattle, taken from orphanages and poor families, transported to mining camps and ranches, used as slave labor. The words hit Ethan like physical blows. He had known Corbin was cruel, had known he was capable of terrible things. But this, "I could not let it continue," Grace said. "I saved 12 of them, got them to an orphanage in Denver where they would be safe, and I took the ledger. And Corbin found out. He found out." She touched her swollen cheek gently. "He said I betrayed him, that I was his and I had no right to make decisions without his permission." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He beat me himself. Then he told his men to take me into the mountains and leave me to freeze. A slow death. Fitting," he said, "for a woman with a cold heart." Silence filled the cabin. Outside, wind stirred the snow. Inside, the fire burned low. Ethan felt something rising in his chest, something he had not felt in 5 years. Rage. Cold, focused, righteous rage. Corbin had killed innocents in the war, had tried to make Ethan a murderer. And when Ethan refused, Corbin had promised there would be consequences. 5 years ago, Anna and Samuel had died of fever. The doctor had been too late, the medicine ineffective. But now, looking at Grace, Ethan wondered, had it really been fever? Or had Corbin finally delivered on his promise? "Where is the ledger now?" Ethan asked, his voice carefully controlled. Grace hesitated, then reached into her shirt and pulled out a small package wrapped in oilcloth. She unwrapped it to reveal a leather-bound book, its pages filled with cramped handwriting. Ethan took it, opened it, scanned the entries. Names, dates, amounts, locations, a complete record of a criminal empire. And on the last pages, the list of children, names, ages, prices. His hands shook as he closed the book. If this gets to the law, he said quietly, Corbin hangs. If it gets to the law, Grace agreed, but Corbin owns half the lawmen in Wyoming, and the ones he does not own, he kills. She looked at Ethan with eyes that expected nothing. I am leaving, she said, as soon as I can walk more than 10 steps without collapsing. I will not bring this down on you. No. The word came out harder than Ethan intended. Grace's hand went to her gun instinctively. Ethan held up his hand, showing he meant no threat, but his voice remained firm. You are not leaving. Not yet. You are too weak. You would die out there. Better I die than both of us. We will not die. Ethan stood, moved to the window, looked out at the white wilderness beyond. This is my land, my home. I built it with my own hands, and I will defend it. He turned back to face her. Corbin took everything from me once, my honor, my brothers in arms, maybe even my family, though I cannot prove it. His jaw set hard. He will not take anything more. Not you, not the ledger, not my home. Grace stared at him. You do not owe me anything. I am a stranger, a criminal. You saved 12 children, Ethan said. That makes you more honorable than most soldiers I knew. I have killed people. So have I. He met her eyes. The question is not what we have done. It is what we do now. The silence stretched between them. Grace looked at this man, this stranger who had pulled her from the snow, who had given her back her gun, who was offering to stand between her and the devil himself. Why, she asked again, the same question as before, but this time there was something else in it, not suspicion, something softer. Ethan thought about Anna, about Samuel, about 5 years of hiding in this cabin running from ghosts. Because I am tired of being afraid, he said, tired of doing nothing, tired of letting evil win, because I am too scared to fight it. He looked at the rifle on the wall, the Springfield he had carried in the war, the weapon he swore he would never fire again. Corbin is coming, he said. You know it, I know it. He will not let this go. Grace nodded slowly. Then we prepare, Ethan said. We turn this cabin into a fortress. And when he comes, we make him pay for every step he takes toward it. For the first time since waking, Grace smiled. It was small, pained, but real. You are either very brave, she said, or very foolish. Perhaps both. They looked at each other across the cabin. Two broken people bound together by violence and vengeance. Two survivors who had decided to stop running. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Light poured across the snow, turning the world into a sea of diamonds. But neither of them looked at the beauty. They were already planning for war. The next 3 days transformed the cabin from a home into a fortress. Ethan worked with the focused intensity of a man who had built defensive positions before. He knew what killed soldiers in sieges, knew the mistakes that turned shelter into tomb. He would not make those mistakes. The door came first. He removed the simple latch and hinges, replacing them with heavy iron hardware salvaged from an old barn. Then he cut thick oak beams to fit across the door frame, creating a bar that could be dropped into place from the inside. Even if the door was broken, the beams would hold. The windows, he boarded them up with planks, leaving narrow gaps at eye level. Rifle ports, wide enough to aim through, too narrow for an enemy to shoot back effectively. He angled them downward, giving clear shots at anyone approaching. Grace watched him work, learning. Her ribs still ached, her hand was still splinted, but she moved with increasing ease. The bruises on her face had faded from purple to yellow. She could see clearly now from both eyes. She was healing, becoming dangerous again. You have done this before, she observed, watching Ethan measure and cut with practiced precision. Fort building was part of cavalry training. We learned to fortify any position quickly. He hammered a nail home with 3 solid strikes. A good defensive position can hold off 10 times this number, if the defenders know what they are doing. And do we know what we are doing? Ethan looked at her. We will find out. Outside, he dug a shallow trench around the cabin, piling the excavated snow into a low wall. It would not stop bullets, but it would slow attackers, make them expose themselves as they climbed over. He strung wire between fence posts at ankle height 20 yards from the cabin, invisible under the snow. A man running in the dark would trip, fall, lose precious seconds. Grace worked on the interior. She counted every round of ammunition they possessed. Ethan had been conservative over the years, buying only what he needed for hunting. But he had also been careful, never wasting shots. They had 143 rifle cartridges, 72 rounds for the revolvers, a double-barrel shotgun with 30 shells, enough for a small war. Maybe. Grace arranged weapons throughout the cabin, a revolver hidden under the table, the shotgun near the door, spare ammunition in 3 different locations in case they were cut off from the main supply. She thought like someone who expected things to go wrong. Expected to be wounded, trapped, desperate. Ethan recognized the mindset. It was how you survived. On the second day, Ethan taught her to shoot the rifle. They went outside in the afternoon when the light was good. The temperature was brutal, the air so cold it hurt to breathe. But the sky was clear. The storm had not arrived yet. The Springfield is different from your Colt, Ethan explained, showing her the weapon. Longer range, more power, but slower to reload and harder to aim. Grace held the rifle, testing its weight. Show me. Ethan positioned her properly, feet shoulder-width apart, left hand supporting the barrel, right hand on the trigger, shoulder pressed firmly against the stock to absorb the recoil. He stood behind her, adjusting her stance, his hands on her shoulders, moving her into alignment. Breathe in, he said quietly. Exhale halfway. Hold. Squeeze, do not pull. Grace did as instructed. The rifle cracked, kicking hard into her shoulder. 50 yards away, a tin can jumped into the air. She lowered the weapon, surprised. Good, Ethan said. Again. They practiced for an hour. Grace's shoulder would be bruised tomorrow, but she was learning. By the end of the session, she was hitting targets at 70 yards with reasonable accuracy. Not as good as Ethan, who could hit a man-sized target at 200 yards, but good enough. When they came back inside, Grace looked at him with new respect. You are a real soldier, she said. Not just someone who wore the uniform, a real one. Ethan cleaned the rifle in silence for a moment, then spoke. I joined the army to serve my country, to protect people. His voice was quiet. But I learned that sometimes the uniform does not make you the good man. The choices do. Grace nodded slowly. Corbin wore the same uniform you did. Yes, and he used it to justify cruelty. Ethan looked at her. The uniform meant nothing. What mattered was what we chose to do while wearing it. He set the rifle aside. I chose to protect innocents even when ordered to kill them. Corbin chose to kill them even when he could have shown mercy. And what do you choose now? Grace asked. I choose to stand, Ethan said simply, to fight for something that matters, even if it costs me everything. Grace held his gaze. Something passed between them in that moment. Not romance. Something deeper. The recognition of one warrior by another. Then we stand together, she said. That night they sat by the fire. The cabin was ready. The weapons were clean. The plan was as solid as they could make it. All that remained was waiting. Grace broke the silence first. Tell me about your wife, she said. Ethan looked at the photograph on the wall. Anna's smile, Samuel's laugh frozen forever. Her name was Anna. We met in town at a church social. She was the minister's daughter. He smiled at the memory. I was a rough soldier, fresh from the war. She should not have given me the time of day. But she did. She did. She saw something in me I did not see in myself. Something worth saving. His voice softened. She made me want to be better, to build instead of destroy. Grace listened, not interrupting. We married within 6 months, built this cabin together, her and I. She was pregnant before the walls were even finished. Ethan's eyes grew distant. Samuel was born in this room, right there in that bed, the happiest day of my life. In the fever, Grace asked gently. 5 years ago, winter like now, Samuel got sick first. High fever, could not keep food down. Then Anna caught it. Ethan's jaw clenched. I rode to town for the doctor. It took him 3 days to come. The snow was bad that year. By the time he arrived with medicine, Samuel was already dead. Anna followed him 12 hours later. The fire crackled. Outside, wind moaned around the cabin walls. The doctor said it was just bad luck. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong illness. Ethan looked at Grace. But now knowing about Corbin, knowing he promised consequences for my defiance, you think he killed them? I think it is possible. Ethan's voice was hard. The doctor was new, from out of town. I had never seen him before. He gave them medicine that made them worse instead of better. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the ledger, opened it to a page near the back. Look at this, she said. Ethan leaned closer. The page showed payments to various people. Names, dates, amounts, and brief descriptions. His eyes scanned down the list, then stopped. Dr. Edwin Marsh, payment for services rendered. February 1884, Wyoming Territory. February 1884, the month Anna and Samuel died. Ethan felt the world tilt. His hands shook as he held the ledger. He did it, Ethan whispered. Corbin killed them, paid a doctor to poison them. Grace nodded slowly. I am sorry. Ethan closed the ledger carefully, set it on the table, stood and walked to the window looking out at the darkness. For 5 years he had blamed himself, blamed the weather, blamed one, but it had been Corbin all along. Patient, vengeful Corbin who had waited years to deliver his punishment. He took everything from me, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. My honor, my purpose, my family. He turned back to Grace. His eyes were cold, colder than she had ever seen them. When he comes, Ethan said quietly, I will kill him, not for justice, not for duty, for revenge. Grace stood faced him across the cabin. When he comes, she said, we will kill him together. They stood in the firelight, two people bound by shared loss and shared rage. Two weapons pointed at the same target. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall. The storm had arrived. On the fourth day, Martha Brennan arrived. Ethan heard the horse before he saw it. He grabbed his rifle, moved to the window, saw the familiar figure riding slowly through the snow. He relaxed, opened the door. Martha was 69 years old, but she sat a horse like a woman half her age. Her face was weathered, her eyes sharp and missing nothing. She wore a heavy coat and carried a basket covered with cloth. She rode right up to the cabin, dismounted with practiced ease. Ethan Morrison, she said, her voice warm despite the cold. You going to invite an old woman inside or make her freeze out here? Ethan smiled despite himself. Come in, Martha. She stepped through the door, stomping snow from her boots, then stopped. Grace stood by the fire gun on her hip, watching the newcomer with wary eyes. Martha looked at Grace, then at Ethan, then back at Grace. Well, she said slowly, this is interesting. Grace's hand drifted toward her gun. Martha noticed but did not seem concerned. Grace Chen, Martha said. It was not a question. Grace went rigid. You know me. I treated a bullet wound for you 2 years ago. You rode into my place half dead, paid me well, and left before dawn. Martha set her basket on the table. I do not forget faces, child, especially ones as memorable as yours. Ethan looked between the two women. You knew she was an outlaw. I knew she was running from something, and I knew she had been shot. Martha shrugged. The frontier is full of people running from their past. It is not my place to judge. She pulled back the cloth on her basket, revealing bread-dried apples, salted meat, and small jars of herbs. But it is my place to help when I can, she continued. And from the look of you, Grace Chen, you need help. Grace's defensiveness wavered. Why would you help me? Martha's expression softened. Because Ethan is helping you, and Ethan Morrison is the best man I know. If he thinks you are worth saving, then you are. She looked at Ethan. You know who is after her. It was not a question. Martha had always been perceptive. Malcolm Corbin, Ethan said. Martha's face went pale. She sat down heavily in a chair. Lord have mercy, she whispered. That devil is still alive. You know him, Grace asked. I treated soldiers in Montana Territory. Corbin was one of them. Martha's voice was tight with old anger. Most brutal man I ever met. He bragged about burning villages, about killing women and children. Said it was necessary to break the enemy's spirit. She looked at Ethan. I reported him. That is part of why he was discharged. Ethan felt pieces clicking together. Corbin had blamed him for the discharge, but it had not been just him. It had been Martha too. and probably others, which meant Corbin's revenge had been long and patient. He is coming here, Ethan said, for Grace and for the ledger she took from him. Martha was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, moved to the window, looked out at the mountains. When he comes, she said quietly, he will bring men. He will not fight fair, and he will not show mercy. She turned back to them. You will need help. I cannot ask anyone to fight this battle, Ethan said. You are not asking, I am offering. Martha's eyes were hard as flint. Corbin represents everything wrong with this world. Cruelty, corruption, evil hidden behind a smile. She looked at Grace. You saved children. That makes you a hero, not a criminal. Then back to Ethan. And you, Ethan Morrison, have spent 5 years hiding from life. It is time to start living again, even if that means fighting. Ethan felt something break inside him, the walls he had built, the isolation he had cherished. Thank you, he said quietly. Martha nodded. I will ride to Cheyenne. Send word to the marshal. It will take time, but help will come. How much time? Grace asked. A week, maybe more in the snow. Corbin will not wait a week, Grace said. Then you hold, Martha said firmly. You hold this cabin. You make him bleed for every inch, and you survive until help arrives. She gathered her basket, prepared to leave, but at the door she turned back. Ethan, she said, Anna would be proud of you. Then she was gone, riding into the white wilderness. Ethan and Grace stood in the cabin, listening to the hoofbeats fade. We have a week, Grace said. Less, Ethan replied. Corbin knows this country. He knows winter. He will come during the next storm when we cannot run or call for help. Grace nodded. Then we have 2 days, 3 at most. They looked at each other. 2 people who had been strangers a week ago. 2 people who now stood back to back against the darkness. Tell me about him, Grace said. About Corbin, how he thinks, how he fights. Ethan sat down and began to speak. He told her about the war, about Malcolm Corbin's rise through the ranks, about his charm and his cruelty, both equally dangerous, about the men who followed him not out of loyalty but out of fear, about the village Corbin had wanted to burn, the women and children Ethan had refused to kill, about the look in Corbin's eyes when Ethan defied him. Not anger, something colder, more patient. He does not forget, Ethan said, and he does not forgive. He will come for you, Grace, but he is also coming for me. Grace listened, her face expressionless. When he finished, she spoke. Then let him come, she said quietly. We will be ready. That night they sat by the fire. Grace cleaned her Colt with practiced hands. Ethan loaded cartridges for the Springfield. The silence between them was comfortable now. The wariness had faded, replaced by something else. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The dragon on your gun, Ethan said, not looking up from his work. What does it mean? Grace's hands paused. She looked at the engraving, her fingers tracing the lines. My mother gave me this gun, she said quietly, the day before she died. She was born in China, came to America as a young woman. She said the dragon represented the fire in our hearts, the strength to survive anything. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She told me that no matter how cold the world became, that fire would never die. Ethan looked at her, saw the pain in her eyes, the loss, the determination. She was right, he said. The fire is still there, I can see it. Grace met his eyes, and for the first time she smiled at him. A real smile, not the bitter one from before. Thank you, she said, for seeing it, for believing it. Ethan nodded, then returned to loading cartridges. Outside, the wind began to pick up. The temperature dropped. In the distance, clouds gathered on the horizon. Another storm was coming, and with it, Malcolm Corbin. The next morning, Grace woke to find Ethan already up, standing at the window. The snow was falling heavily now, thick flakes that obscured everything beyond 50 yards. Is it time? She asked. Soon. Ethan did not turn from the window. The storm will get worse before it gets better. That is when they will come. Grace checked her weapons. The Colt was loaded, cleaned, ready. She had a second revolver now, one of Ethan's tucked into her belt. The rifle leaned against the wall, within easy reach. She was as ready as she would ever be. They ate a simple breakfast. Salt pork and cornbread, hot coffee, food that would sustain them through what was coming. Ethan barely tasted his. His mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios. Attack vectors, defensive responses, contingencies. They will come from multiple directions, he said, thinking aloud. Try to split our attention. Corbin knows tactics. He will not make it easy. How many men do you think he will bring? Grace asked. At least 4 or 5, maybe more. Ethan looked at her. Corbin never fights fair. He brings overwhelming force. 5 trained killers against 2 defenders. Grace smiled grimly. I have faced worse odds. Have you, YMO? No, she admitted, but I am still here. So the odds cannot be that bad. Despite everything, Ethan almost laughed. The day passed in tense waiting. They took turns watching from the windows, looking for movement in the white curtain of falling snow, seeing nothing but wilderness and storm. Afternoon faded to evening. The storm intensified. Wind screamed around the cabin, driving snow into drifts that reached halfway up the walls. Perfect conditions for an attack. Visibility was almost zero. Sound was muffled by the wind. A man could approach within 20 feet without being seen or heard. Ethan and Grace positioned themselves on opposite sides of the cabin, each watching a different field of fire. They did not speak, did not need to. The waiting was its own kind of torture. Then just after nightfall, they heard it, a sound that did not belong to the storm, the whinny of a horse. Ethan raised his rifle. Grace drew her Colt. They looked at each other across the cabin, a silent question. Is this it? A voice called out from the darkness, muffled by wind and snow, but audible. Ethan Morrison, I know you are in there. Not Corbin's voice. Someone else. Ethan moved to the door, staying to one side. Who is that? Sheriff William Kane. I have a warrant for the arrest of Grace Chen. Send her out and there will be no trouble. Grace's eyes widened. She moved to the window, peered out through the rifle port. 3 shapes in the snow. Horses. Riders. Too dark to see faces. The sheriff, she whispered. He is in Corbin's pocket. Has been for years. Ethan kept his position by the door. The warrant legal. Kane's voice came back, sounding annoyed. Signed by Judge Harrison himself. Murder, theft, assault. Send her out now, Morrison. Ethan looked at Grace. She shook her head. He called back. Judge Harrison died 6 months ago. I read about it in the newspaper. Silence from outside. Then Kane's voice, harder now. You are interfering with the law, Morrison. You are interfering with my property, Kane, and lying about a warrant. Ethan's voice was cold. Who paid you, Corbin? More silence. Then a different voice, one Ethan did not recognize. We are coming in, Morrison, one way or another. Ethan stepped back from the door, raised his rifle. Grace moved to the window, both guns drawn. The shapes outside moved, coming closer. Last chance, Kane called. Give up the woman and walk away, or we come in shooting. Ethan looked at Grace. She looked back at him. And in that moment, they both knew what had to happen. My property, Ethan called back. My choice, and I choose to tell you to get the hell off my land before I start shooting. A pause, then Kane's voice filled with false regret. Have it your way, Morrison. Boys, take him. The attack came fast. 2 men rushed the front door, firing revolvers as they came. Bullets punched through the wood splinters flying, but the door held the heavy beams, absorbing the impacts. Ethan aimed through the rifle port, found a target, squeezed the trigger. The Springfield roared. One of the attackers went down, clutching his legs, screaming. The second man dove for cover behind the woodpile. At the same moment, a shape appeared at the side of window. A man climbing up, trying to break through the boards. Grace fired twice. The first shot missed. The second punched through the gap in the boards and caught the man in the shoulder. He fell backwards into the snow with a howl of pain. Then silence. Just the wind and the wounded men groaning. Kane's voice came again from somewhere in the darkness. You just shot a lawman, Morrison. That is a hanging offense. You just tried to murder me in my own home, Ethan shouted back. That is self-defense. He reloaded quickly, eyes scanning for more movement. Grace moved to a different window, watching a new angle. 2 down. How many left? At least Kane. Maybe 1 or 2 more. They will try again. Yes, but now they know we will fight back. Minutes passed. The wounded men crawled away, helped by their companions. Ethan could hear horses moving in the darkness. The sound of retreat. Then Kane's voice one more time, adding more boards to the door, stacking furniture as additional barricades. moving supplies into the most defensible corners. By morning, the cabin looked like what it was, a fortress preparing for siege. And still the storm raged. The next morning, a visitor arrived. Ethan heard the horse approaching and immediately grabbed his rifle. Grace took position at the window. But the rider came slowly, hands raised and visible. And when he got close enough to see, clearly Ethan's blood ran cold. It was Thomas Grant, but not a healthy Thomas. This man was barely staying on his horse. Blood soaked his coat. His face was pale as death. Ethan threw open the door and ran out into the snow. Grace followed, guns drawn, but lowered. They reached Thomas as he fell from the saddle. Ethan caught him, lowered him gently to the ground. Thomas, Thomas, what happened? Thomas's eyes focused on Ethan with difficulty. Blood bubbled at his lips when he spoke. Corbin, he suspected, tortured me. Each word was an effort. I did not tell him anything, I swear. We need to get you inside, Ethan said, trying to lift him. Thomas gripped his arm with surprising strength. No time. Listen, they are coming. Tonight, during the storm. How many? 5 men, Corbin and 4 others. Thomas coughed, more blood. They know you are ready, but Corbin does not care. He wants you dead more than he wants the ledger. Grace knelt beside them. Where are you hurt? Thomas pulled his coat open. His stomach was a mess of knife wounds, deep cuts deliberately placed to cause maximum pain without killing quickly. Torture. Grace and Ethan exchanged a look. They both knew what those wounds meant. Thomas was dying. Nothing could save him now. Get him inside, Grace said quietly. He deserves that much. They carried Thomas into the cabin, laid him on the bed. Grace brought water, but he could not swallow it. The damage was too severe. Ethan sat beside him, holding his hand, like he had held Anna's hand, like he had held Samuel's, watching another person he cared about slip away. Thomas's breathing was labored, wet. His eyes kept trying to close. Ethan, he whispered, I need to tell you something. Save your strength. No. Thomas gripped his hand harder. You need to know. He coughed, grimaced in pain, then continued. Your wife, your son, it was not fever. Ethan went very still. What, Corbin? He told me last night, while he was cutting me. Thomas's voice was fading. He poisoned them, 5 years ago, paid a doctor to give them tainted medicine. He said it was punishment for defying him, for making him look weak. The world seemed to stop. Ethan heard the words but could not process them, could not make them real. He laughed about it, Thomas whispered. Said Anna begged him to save Samuel, but he let them both die. Ethan's vision went red. His entire body shook with rage so pure, so absolute, it was beyond thought or reason. Corbin had not just killed his family. He had made them suffer, had listened to Anna beg, had watched Samuel die in agony. I am sorry, Thomas was saying. I am so sorry I did not know, did not stop him. Ethan could not speak, could not move. The rage had paralyzed him. Grace stepped forward, placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him, keeping him present. Thomas's eyes were glazing over, his breathing slowing. Ethan, he whispered, kill him. For me, for your family, for all of us. I will, Ethan said. His voice did not sound like his own. I promise you, Thomas, he dies tonight. Thomas smiled just slightly. Good, that is good. His eyes closed. His breathing stopped. Thomas Grant, brother-in-arms, died in Ethan Morrison's cabin. Died trying to do the right thing. Died with honor. Ethan sat for a long moment, still holding the dead man's hand. His mind was blank, empty of everything except one thought. Corbin dies tonight. Grace gently pulled him to his feet. We need to prepare. They will be here soon. Ethan looked at her. She saw something in his eyes that made her step back. Not fear, not grief, pure, cold, focused rage. Good, he said quietly. Let them come. They wrapped Thomas's body in a blanket, moved it to the barn. They would bury him properly later, if there was a later. Back in the cabin, Ethan moved with machine precision, checking weapons, loading ammunition, positioning supplies. Grace watched him, recognizing the change. The gentle man who had saved her was gone. In his place was the soldier, the killer, the weapon. Ethan, she said quietly, He looked at her. Do not lose yourself to this. Do not let him turn you into what he is. Ethan was silent for a moment, then shook his head. I am not becoming what he is. I am becoming what I need to be. His voice was steady, calm. Corbin kills for pleasure, for power. I kill for justice, for protection. There is a difference. Grace nodded slowly. Yes, there is. She loaded her own weapons. Then let us give him the justice he deserves. The storm reached its peak as night fell. Wind howled like a living thing. Snow fell so thick it was impossible to see more than a few feet. Perfect conditions for an attack. Ethan and Grace took their positions, him by the front, her by the back, rifles ready, revolvers loaded. The cabin was dark except for the fire. They had extinguished the lamps, not wanting to give attackers a silhouette to aim at. They waited. An hour passed, then another. The tension was unbearable. Every sound could be an enemy. Every shadow could be death. Then Grace heard it, a sound that did not belong, a soft thump against the back wall. She aimed her rifle at the sound. Waited. Another thump. Then a scraping sound. Someone was climbing up to the back window. Grace fired through the boards. The rifle's muzzle flash lit the cabin for an instant. A scream from outside, then the sound of a body hitting the ground. Back window, she shouted. Ethan moved to cover her position. A man appeared in the front rifle port trying to aim inside. Ethan shot him in the face. The man dropped without a sound. Then chaos. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Bullets punched through the walls, ricocheted off stone, shattered the remaining glass in the windows. Ethan and Grace returned fire, shooting at muzzle flashes, at shadows, at anything that moved. A man crashed through the front door, the wood splintering under his weight. It was Carson Webb, the big man Ethan had warned about. He had an axe. Ethan shot him in the chest. Webb staggered but did not fall. He swung the axe, embedding it in the doorframe. Ethan shot him again and again. Webb finally felt blood spreading across the floor. Grace was fighting her own battle at the back window. Two men were trying to break through simultaneously. She emptied her rifle into one, dropped it, drew both revolvers. The second man made it through the window. Grace shot him 3 times. He collapsed half in, half out, blocking the opening with his body. Then silence, sudden and complete except for the storm. Ethan and Grace stayed frozen, weapons ready, ears straining. 4 men down. That left one. Corbin. The voice came from outside, smooth, cultured, mocking. Magnificent Morrison, you have become quite the killer. Ethan said nothing, scanned for a target, saw nothing but snow and darkness. I trained you well, Corbin continued. All those years ago, I knew you had it in you, the capacity for violence. You just needed the right motivation. Show yourself, Corbin, Ethan shouted. Laughter drifted through the storm. Oh, I do not think so, not yet. A pause, then Corbin's voice closer now. Did Thomas tell you before he died about your wife, your son? Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. He told me. Good. I wanted you to know, wanted you to understand. Corbin's voice was almost conversational. Anna begged so prettily, please save my son. Kill me, but save Samuel. It was quite touching. Ethan could not breathe, could not think. The rage was consuming him. But I did not save him, of course. Corbin continued. I let them both die. Slowly, painfully. Just like I am going to let you die. Grace touched Ethan's arm. He is trying to make you angry, make you careless. Ethan knew she was right, but knowing did not help. The rage was beyond control now. Come out and face me, he shouted into the storm. Or are you too much of a coward? More laughter. Coward no, Morrison. I am simply patient. I can wait out here all night, all week if necessary. You have to come out eventually, and when you do, I will be waiting. Ethan looked at Grace. She looked back at him. They both knew Corbin was right. They had food for perhaps a week. Water was not a problem with all the snow, but they could not stay barricaded forever. Eventually, they would have to emerge. Unless. Ethan had an idea, a terrible, dangerous idea, but it might work. He moved to Grace, whispered in her ear. There is a root cellar, access through a trap door under the bed. Take the ledger. Hide there. Grace shook her head. I am not hiding while you fight. I am not asking you to hide. I am asking you to survive. Ethan met her eyes. If I fail, if Corbin kills me, you wait until he leaves. Then you take the ledger to the marshal. Make sure Corbin pays for everything. Ethan, no. This is my fight now, he said quietly. Corbin wants me dead. I am going to give him what he wants. A fair fight, man to man. Grace grabbed his arm. He will kill you. Maybe, but he will have to do it face to face. No more hiding, no more games. Ethan moved to the door before Grace could stop him. He dropped the heavy beam, pulled it open. Wind and snow blasted into the cabin. Ethan stepped out into the storm. Corbin, he shouted into the darkness. You want me? I am here. Come and take me. For a moment, there was only the wind. Then a shape materialized from the white curtain of snow. Malcolm Corbin stepped into the light spilling from the cabin door. He was 43 years old but looked younger, handsome in a cold, aristocratic way, tall and lean with pale hair and eyes like blue ice. He wore an expensive coat that somehow remained unstained despite the violence of the night, and he was smiling. Hello, Morrison, he said. It has been a long time. Ethan raised his rifle. Not long enough. Corbin raised his hand, showing he held no weapon. I am unarmed, as you can see. Hardly sporting to shoot me like this. You murdered my family. I did. Corbin's smile widened, and I would do it again. Anna's screams were exquisite, and little Samuel crying for his mother. Quite moving, really. Ethan's vision went red, his finger tightened on the trigger. But before he could fire, Grace's voice cut through his rage. Ethan, wait, he glanced back. Grace was at the door, rifle aimed past him at Corbin. In that instant of distraction, Corbin moved. His hand went to his coat, drew a revolver that had been hidden there, aimed at Ethan. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Corbin's bullet hit Ethan in the side. Pain exploded through his body. He staggered, fell to one knee. Grace's bullet hit Corbin in the shoulder. He spun, went down in the snow. But he was not done. Even wounded Corbin was fast. He rolled, came up firing. Grace ducked back into the cabin as bullets punched through the doorframe. Ethan, still on his knees, raised his rifle. Fired. The shot went wide. The pain in his side was too much, throwing off his aim. Corbin stood clutching his shoulder. Blood ran down his coat, but he was laughing. You cannot even kill me when I am wounded, he said. Pathetic. He aimed his revolver at Ethan's head. Grace appeared in the doorway, both revolvers drawn. Corbin, he turned toward her. She fired. Both guns at once. One bullet grazed his leg, the other missed entirely, but it was enough to make him stumble, to give Ethan the opening he needed. Ethan lunged forward, not with the rifle, with his whole body. He crashed into Corbin, driving him backwards into the snow. The revolver flew from Corbin's hand. They grappled in the snow, trading blows. Corbin was faster, more skilled at close combat, but Ethan was stronger, fueled by rage and grief. Ethan's fist connected with Corbin's jaw. Once, twice, 3 times. Corbin kneed him in the wound. Ethan screamed, rolled away. Corbin scrambled for his gun, found it, raised it. Grace shot him again. This time the bullet took him in the chest. Corbin fell backwards, coughed blood. Are dying, Ethan said quietly. We are dying, Ethan said quietly. We are both dying, Corbin wheezed. Blood bubbled at his lips. I got you too. Ethan looked down at his side. Blood was spreading across his shirt. A lot of blood. Corbin had hit something vital. At least I will have company in hell, Corbin said. Then he laughed. That same mocking laugh that had haunted Ethan's nightmares for years. Ethan leaned down close, made sure Corbin could see his eyes. You will go to hell alone, he said, because I am not done living. He stood, staggered back toward the cabin. Corbin tried to raise his gun one more time, but he did not have the strength. The revolver slipped from his fingers. You will never be free, Corbin gasped. I will haunt you forever. No, Ethan said. You are already forgotten. He walked away, did not look back. Behind him, Malcolm Corbin died alone in the snow. No final words, no dramatic moment, just death, cold and meaningless. Grace caught Ethan as he reached the door. He was barely conscious that the blood loss catching up to him. Hold on, she said. Please, Ethan, hold on. She dragged him inside, closed and barred the door, laid him on the bed. The wound was bad, very bad. The bullet had entered low on his right side, possibly hitting his liver or kidney. Grace tore his shirt away, pressed cloth against the wound to slow the bleeding. But there was so much blood. "Grace," Ethan whispered. His face was pale. "The ledger. Get it to the marshal." "Shut up," Grace said. Her hands were shaking as she worked. "You are not dying. I will not allow it." She grabbed the medical supplies, the needle and thread, the whiskey. "This is going to hurt," she said. Ethan managed a weak smile. "More than getting shot." "Probably." Grace poured whiskey over the wound. Ethan arched in pain but did not cry out. She had stitched wounds before, on herself, on others, but never one this serious. Her hands steadied as she worked, muscle memory taking over. The training she had received in Corbin's organization ironically was saving Ethan's life now. She cleaned the wound, stitched it closed with small, careful stitches, bandaged it tightly. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness. When he was aware, he watched Grace work, watched her save his life with the same precision he had used to save hers. Finally, she finished, sat back. Her hands were covered in his blood. "You did good," Ethan whispered. "Do not talk. You need to rest." Grace, he reached for her hand. She took it. "Thank you for everything. You fought for me first. We fought for each other." Grace nodded. Tears ran down her face, cutting tracks through the grime and blood. "Rest now," she said. "I will keep watch." Ethan's eyes closed. His breathing evened out. Grace sat beside the bed, holding his hand, her revolver in her lap. Outside, the storm began to fade. The wind quieted, the snow slowed, and in the growing silence, Grace Chen waited for dawn. Dawn came slowly, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Grace had not slept, could not sleep. She sat beside Ethan's bed, watching his chest rise and fall, counting each breath like a prayer. He was alive. For now, the wound was bad, but the bleeding had stopped. That was something. His color was better than it had been in the darkest hours of the night, though still too pale. Grace stood, her body stiff from sitting in one position for hours. She moved to the window, looked out at the aftermath of battle. 5 bodies lay in the snow. Carson Webb by the door, his massive form already half buried in white. 2 men near the back window, another by the woodpile, and farther out, barely visible, Malcolm Corbin. Dead. All of them dead. Grace felt nothing looking at them. No satisfaction, no guilt, just emptiness. She had killed before, but never like this, never in defense of something that mattered. Never for someone she cared about. The thought stopped her. Cared about. When had Ethan Morrison become more than just the man who saved her? More than an ally in a fight? She did not know, could not pinpoint the moment. But looking at him now pale and wounded, she knew it was true. If he died, something in her would die with him. Grace shook her head, pushing the thought away. He would not die. She would not allow it. She checked his bandages. The bleeding had not restarted. Good. His forehead was warm but not burning. No fever yet, though it would likely come. She needed help. Real help. A doctor who could do more than her crude battlefield medicine. But the nearest doctor was in town 20 miles away, through deep snow. And she could not leave Ethan alone. Not like this. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan's eyes opened. He looked around, disoriented, then focused on her. "Grace," he whispered. His voice was hoarse, dry. She brought him water, helped him drink. He managed a few sips before falling back against the pillow. "How long?" he asked. "Since the fight, about 6 hours. Ethan looked toward the window. "They are still out there." "Yes, I will bury them when you are stronger." "Corbin," Grace nodded. "Dead. I watched him die." Something passed across Ethan's face. Relief, perhaps, or grief, or both. 5 years of rage and pain finally ended. But at what cost? "You are hurt," he said, noticing the way she held her left arm. Grace looked down. In the chaos, she had not noticed. A bullet had grazed her forearm, tearing cloth and skin. Not serious, but painful. "It is nothing," she said. "Let me see." "You can barely move." "Grace." His voice was weak but firm. "Let me see." She sighed, sat beside him, rolled up her sleeve. The wound was shallow but long, already crusted with dried blood. Ethan examined it with practiced eyes. Clean it. Bandage it. You know how. I know. Then do it. You cannot take care of me if you get an infection. Grace almost smiled. Even wounded, possibly dying, he was trying to take care of her. She cleaned and wrapped the wound while Ethan watched. His eyes kept trying to close, but he forced them open. You should sleep, Grace said. So should you. One of us needs to keep watch. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then spoke, his voice barely audible. Thank you for saving me. Grace met his eyes. You gave me back my life first. Ethan reached for her hand. She took it, felt the warmth of his grip. You were always strong, he said. You just needed to remember. His eyes closed. This time Grace let him sleep. She stood, moved to the door, opened it slowly, rifle ready. The morning was clear and cold. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow covered everything, smooth and pristine except where blood had stained it red. Grace stepped outside. The cold bit through her clothes, but she welcomed it. After the heat and smoke of battle, the clean air was a blessing. She walked to Corbin's body first. He lay on his back, eyes open and staring at nothing. Snow had begun to cover him, nature already reclaiming what remained. Grace looked down at the man who had owned her, who had used her, who had beaten her and left her to die. She felt nothing. He was just meat now, empty, powerless. You were wrong, she said quietly. You said you would haunt me forever. But you are nothing, just another dead man in the snow. She turned away, did not look back. The other bodies she examined with clinical detachment. Carson Webb she recognized from Ethan's descriptions. A big man, loyal to Corbin until the end. The others were strangers, young men mostly, probably desperate for money, following a charismatic leader into darkness. Dead now because of choices they made. Grace felt pity for them, but only a little. She could not bury them yet. Not alone, not with Ethan wounded. But she could not leave them near the cabin either. She dragged them one by one to the barn. It was hard work, her arm hurt. Her ribs still healing, protested every movement. But she managed. Thomas Grant's body was still there, wrapped in a blanket. Grace stood over him for a moment. You died well, she said. Died doing the right thing. Ethan will make sure you are remembered. By the time she finished, the sun was high and bright. The temperature had risen slightly enough to make the work bearable. Grace returned to the cabin. Ethan was awake again, trying to sit up. Stop, she said, hurrying to his side. You will tear the stitches. I need to get up, need to help. You need to rest. Grace pushed him back down gently but firmly. I took care of the bodies. Everything is secure. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, saw the exhaustion in her face, the blood on her clothes, the pain she was trying to hide. You cannot do this alone, he said. I can, and I will. Grace sat beside him. You fought your battle. Let me fight mine. They looked at each other, understanding, passing between them without words. Two warriors, two survivors, taking turns being strong when the other was weak. Martha will come, Ethan said. When the storm clears, she will come to check on us. How long? 2 days, maybe 3. Grace nodded. Then we hold for 3 days. The hours passed slowly. Grace tended to Ethan, checking his wound, making sure he drank water and ate what little he could keep down. By afternoon, the fever started. Ethan's skin burned to the touch. He thrashed in the bed, tangled in blankets, lost in delirium. Grace fought the panic rising in her chest. She had seen this before. Infection. The killer that claimed more soldiers than bullets ever did. She prepared cold compresses, laid them on his forehead and chest, made willow bark tea for the fever, kept him as comfortable as she could. But she could not fight the infection itself, not without proper medicine. All she could do was wait and hope. That night, Ethan's fever broke. He woke lucid, weak, but aware. Grace nearly wept with relief. Water, he croaked. She brought him water. He drank deeply, color returning to his face. How long was I out? Most of the day. You had a fever. Ethan nodded, understanding. It will come back. Infection always gets worse before it gets better. I know. If I do not make it, promise me something. You will make it, Grace interrupted. Her voice was fierce. I did not survive Corbin just to lose you to a fever. Ethan smiled weakly. Stubborn. Yes. He reached for her hand again. She took it without hesitation now. Grace, he said quietly, Listen, you saved me, not just from Corbin, from myself, from the prison I built in this cabin. He paused, gathering strength. For 5 years, I was dead inside, going through the motions of living, but feeling nothing. Then you came, and you reminded me what it means to care about something, to fight for something. Grace felt tears burning in her eyes. Ethan, please, save your strength. I need to say this. He pulled her closer. You are not broken, Grace. You are not the things Corbin made you do. You are strong and brave and honorable. You deserve a life, a real life, not running, not hiding, a life where you can be proud of who you are. The tears fell now, running down Grace's face. I do not know how to be that person. You already are. Ethan's eyes were intense despite his weakness. You proved it when you saved those children, when you took the ledger, when you stood beside me against impossible odds. That is who you are, Grace Chen, a warrior with honor. Grace could not speak, could only hold his hand and cry. Promise me, Ethan whispered. Promise me you will live, really live, not just survive. Only if you promise the same, Grace managed. Ethan smiled. Deal. His eyes closed, but this time his breathing was steady. The fever had not returned. Grace sat beside him, holding his hand, watching the fire burn low. Outside, the night was quiet. No storm, no enemies, just peace. For the first time in weeks, Grace allowed herself to hope. 3 days passed. The fever returned twice more, each time worse than before. Grace barely left Ethan's side, forcing water between his lips, changing blood-soaked bandages, fighting death with nothing but stubborn will. On the third morning, the fever finally broke for good. His eyes opened, clear and focused. And Grace wept. That afternoon, Martha arrived. Grace heard the horse and grabbed her rifle, moving to the window. But when she saw the familiar figure, she nearly collapsed with relief. She opened the door. Martha took one look at her and dismounted quickly. Child, you look like death, Martha said, hurrying inside my arm. Ethan is worse. Martha went to the bed immediately, examined Ethan with experienced hands, checking his wound, his temperature, his pulse. The stitching is good, she said. You did well, but he needs real medicine. Antibiotics if I can find them. She opened her bag, began pulling out supplies. Stronger bandages, herbal remedies, a bottle of clear liquid. Drink this, Martha said, handing it to Grace. It will help with the pain and exhaustion. Grace drank. It was bitter but warming. Martha worked on Ethan, cleaning the wound more thoroughly, applying poultices that smelled of strong herbs. She worked with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. What happened here? Martha asked as she worked. Grace told her about the battle, about Corbin, about Thomas's death and Ethan's revenge. Martha listened without interrupting. When Grace finished, she nodded slowly. Malcolm Corbin is dead, she said. It was not a question, but there was satisfaction in her voice. Good. The world is better without him. She finished bandaging Ethan, then turned to Grace. Now you, let me see that arm. Grace showed her the graze. Martha examined it, cleaned it properly, rewrapped it. You are both lucky to be alive, she said. I know. Martha looked at her with sharp eyes. But you are alive, and that matters. She stood, moved to the window, looked out at the carnage that had been cleaned up but not forgotten. I brought the marshal, Martha said. He is waiting down the road with 2 deputies. I wanted to check on you first before bringing them here. Grace tensed. The marshal? You have nothing to fear from him. I showed him the ledger, or rather, the copy I made before leaving for Cheyenne. Martha pulled a familiar book from her bag. This is the original. I thought you might want it back. Grace took the ledger with shaking hands. You copied it? Of course. You think I would ride with the only evidence against a criminal empire? Martha smiled. I am old child, not stupid. She moved to the door. The marshal will want to talk to you, to Ethan when he is well enough. But you are not in trouble. From what I told him, you are heroes. Grace could not process the word. Heroes. She had never been a hero, had never imagined she could be. The children, Grace said, the ones from the ledger, are they safe? Martha's expression softened. They are safe. The marshal sent men to the locations listed in the book. 12 children recovered, all alive, all being placed with good families. Grace's knees weakened. She sat down heavily. 12 children, alive, safe, free, because of her. They want to thank you, Martha continued. When you are ready, they would like to meet the woman who saved them. Grace shook her head. I do not deserve thanks. I worked for Corbin. I helped build his empire. And then you tore it down. Martha knelt in front of her, took her hands. You cannot change the past, Grace. None of us can. But you can choose your future. Those children are alive because of you. That matters more than anything you did before. Grace looked at this old woman who had shown her kindness without judgment, who had helped without asking for anything in return. Thank you, Grace whispered. Martha patted her hand. Now rest, both of you. I will bring the marshal tomorrow when you are stronger. She left and Grace was alone with Ethan again. He was awake, had heard everything. 12 children, he said quietly. You saved 12 children, Grace. We did it together. You helped me fight Corbin. No. Ethan shook his head. You saved them before you ever met me. This was your fight, your victory. Grace sat beside him. Then it is our victory, because I could not have survived without you. They sat in comfortable silence watching the afternoon light fade. Two broken people who had found each other in the darkness, who had fought together and survived together, who had against all odds won. The marshal came the next day with 2 deputies and a doctor. The doctor examined Ethan, declared him lucky to be alive, and left stronger medicine and instructions for care. The marshal, a weathered man of 56 named James Wright, interviewed both Grace and Ethan. He listened to their stories, took notes, compared their accounts with the ledger. Malcolm Corbin was wanted in 3 territories, Wright said, for murder, theft, extortion, and trafficking. There is a substantial reward for his capture. He looked at Grace. Dead or alive, $5,000. Grace blinked. 5,000? Plus rewards for his associates. Another 2,000 for the lot of them. Wright consulted his notes. That is $7,000 total. Split between the 2 of you if you want. Grace and Ethan looked at each other. $7,000. A fortune. Enough to start over. To build a real life. The charges against you, Miss Chen, have been dropped, Wright continued, given that they were false charges filed by corrupt officials working for Corbin. You are a free woman. Free. The word sounded foreign. Grace had not been free since she was 20 years old, had not believed she ever would be again. There is one more thing, Wright said. He pulled out an official-looking document. The children you saved, their families or the orphanages caring for them wanted me to give you this. He handed the document to Grace. She opened it, read slowly. It was a letter of gratitude, signed by 12 families, thanking her for saving their children, calling her a hero. Grace's hands shook as she read the names. Children she had never met. Lives she had saved without ever seeing their faces. They want to meet you, Wright said, when you are ready, to thank you in person. Grace could not speak, could only nod. Wright stood to leave. You both did a brave thing, a good thing. The territory is safer because of you. He paused at the door. If you need anything, send word. You have friends in the marshal's office now. Then he was gone, taking his deputies with him. Grace and Ethan sat in the quiet cabin. $7,000, Grace said finally. A new start, Ethan replied. Grace looked at him. What will you do with it, with your half? Ethan thought for a moment. Rebuild, expand the cabin, maybe buy more cattle, make this place into what I always dreamed it could be. He looked at her. What about you? Grace touched the dragon engraving on her colt. I do not know. I have never had the freedom to choose before. You have it now. Yes, Grace smiled slowly. I have it now. 2 weeks passed. Ethan's wound healed slowly but steadily. He was able to walk now, though, still weak. Grace changed his bandages daily, watched for signs of infection, made sure he rested. They buried Thomas Grant on a hillside overlooking the valley. Ethan carved a marker from wood inscribed with Thomas's name and the words, "He died with honor." They stood by the grave, Grace holding Ethan's arm to steady him. He saved us, Ethan said. Without his warning, we would have been unprepared. Corbin would have won. He was a good man, Grace agreed. He made mistakes, but he chose right in the end. They stood in silence for a while, honoring a fallen friend. The bodies of Corbin and his men had been taken by the marshal, buried in unmarked graves far from here. Grace was glad. She did not want Corbin's corpse poisoning this land. As the weeks turned to a month, spring began to arrive. The snow melted slowly, revealing brown earth and dead grass. Streams swelled with runoff rushing down from the mountains. The aspens on the hillsides began to bud tiny green points against gray branches. Birds returned, filling the air with song. The cold gradually loosened its grip. Grace watched the transformation with wonder. She had seen spring before, but never like this. Never with hope in her heart instead of fear. She helped Ethan with the ranch work as he recovered, fed the cattle, repaired fences damaged by winter, cleaned the cabin until it shone. She found she liked the work, the simplicity of it, the honesty. You worked hard and you saw results. No lies, no manipulation, just effort and reward. Martha visited often, bringing food and medicine and company. She taught Grace things: how to bake bread, how to preserve vegetables, how to make the herbs that healed. Skills for a life Grace had never imagined living. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant orange and pink, Grace and Ethan sat on the cabin's front porch. It was a new addition. Ethan had built it with Grace's help as soon as he was strong enough, a place to sit and watch the valley. The mountains rose before them, snow still clinging to the peaks, but green, creeping up the slopes. The valley below was coming alive with spring. "It is beautiful," Grace said. Ethan nodded. "Yes, it is." They sat in comfortable silence, a silence born of understanding, not awkwardness. "The families are coming next week," Grace said. "The ones with the children I saved. Martha arranged it. Are you ready?" "I do not know." Grace looked at her hands, still scarred, still marked by violence. "What do I say to them? The truth, that you are glad their children are safe." Grace was quiet for a moment. "What if they see me for what I was, a killer, an enforcer for a monster?" Ethan reached over, took her hand. "They will see you for what you are, a woman who risked everything to save innocent lives." He squeezed her hand gently. "That is all that matters, Grace, not what you were, what you are now." Grace looked at him. This man who had saved her life, who had stood beside her against evil, who had believed in her when she could not believe in herself. "What am I now?" she asked quietly. Ethan smiled. "You are Grace Chen, a warrior who found her honor again." He paused. "And if you want, you are home. Here. With me." Grace's breath caught. "Ethan, I am not asking for anything," he said quickly. "No obligations, no expectations. Just offering you a place to stay. As long as you want. A home. If you want one." Grace looked out at the valley, at the mountains, at this land that had almost killed her and then given her life. She thought about the cabin, about the work of building and growing, about quiet evenings by the fire and hard days in the sun, about a life without fear, without running, without pretending to be something she was not, a life where she could simply be. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like a home." Ethan's smile widened. "Then you have one." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in fire. Two people who had found each other in the darkness, who had fought together and survived together, who would build together whatever came next. The families arrived on a warm spring day, 12 families with 12 children ranging in age from 5 to 14. They came in wagons and on horseback, traveling from across the territory. Grace stood outside the cabin, her stomach twisted with nerves. Ethan stood beside her, a steady presence. The first wagon stopped. A man and woman climbed down, helping a young girl, perhaps 8 years old. The woman approached Grace slowly. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around her. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you for saving my daughter." They shared food, told stories, laughed and cried together. As the sun began to set, they prepared to leave. But before they did, they gathered around Grace. The oldest child, a girl of 14 named Sarah, stepped forward. She held a package wrapped in cloth. "We made something for you," Sarah said. "All of us together." Grace unwrapped the package. Inside was a quilt, beautiful and intricate, made from dozens of different fabrics. Each square was unique, stitched with care. "Every family made a square," Sarah explained, "so you would remember us, Remember what you did. In the center of the quilt, embroidered in gold thread, was a dragon, Chinese-style breathing fire. Grace could not speak, could only hold the quilt and creep on. You gave us our lives back, Sarah said quietly. This is just a small way to say thank you. Grace pulled the girl into a hug, then opened her arms, and the other children rushed in, all 12 of them surrounding her, holding her. A woman who had thought herself beyond redemption, surrounded by the lives she had saved. Ethan watched from the porch, his own eyes wet. When the families finally left, Grace and Ethan stood together, waving goodbye. The quilt was draped over Grace's shoulders like a cloak. That was a good thing you did, Ethan said. Grace nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They went inside as darkness fell. Grace spread the quilt on the bed, running her fingers over each square. 12 children, 12 families, 12 reasons to believe she was more than her past. Ethan, she said quietly. He looked up from the fire. I want to stay, not just for a while, permanently, if the offer still stands. Ethan's face softened. It stands, for as long as you want. I have money from the reward. I can help expand the cabin, buy more cattle, build this place into something real. You do not have to pay rent, Grace. Not rent. Partnership. She looked at him. We survived together, fought together. I want to build together, too. Ethan stood across the room to her, extended his hand. Partners, he said. Grace took his hand, shook it firmly. Partners. They stood there, hands clasped, looking at each other. Something passed between them. Not romantic love, not yet, but the foundation of it. Respect, trust, understanding. Two people who had saved each other in every way possible. Summer came slowly to the valley. The snow disappeared entirely, revealing a landscape of green and gold. Wildflowers bloomed in the meadows. The aspens filled with leaves that whispered in the wind. Grace and Ethan worked together, expanding the cabin. They added 2 more rooms, a larger kitchen, a proper bedroom for each of them. They bought more cattle with the reward money, built new fences, planted a garden. The work was hard, exhausting, but it was good work, honest work. Grace found herself changing in subtle ways. The constant tension in her shoulders eased. Her hand no longer went to her gun at every unexpected sound. She slept through the night without nightmares. She was healing. Not just her body, but her soul. Ethan changed too. The haunted look in his eyes faded. He laughed more, talked more, engaged with the world instead of hiding from it. Martha visited, often pleased to see them both thriving. She brought news from town. The marshal had dismantled Corbin's entire organization using the ledger. Dozens of arrests, hundreds of victims freed or compensated. Grace's name was known now throughout the territory. The woman who brought down Malcolm Corbin. The hero who saved the children. Grace was not sure how she felt about that, but she was learning to accept it. One evening in late summer, Grace stood by Thomas Grant's grave. She had brought wildflowers, placed them at the base of the marker. We are doing well, she said quietly to the grave. Ethan and I, building a life. A good life. The wind rustled through the grass. Birds sang in the trees. You would be proud of us, I think. We are honoring your sacrifice, making something good from all that pain. She touched the marker gently. Rest well, Thomas Grant, brother in arms, hero. When she returned to the cabin, Ethan was on the porch watching the sunset. Grace sat beside him. They had fallen into this routine, evening on the porch, watching the day end. I visited Thomas, Grace said. Ethan nodded. I go there too, talk to him sometimes. And to Anna and Samuel, tell them about you. Grace looked at him, surprised. What do you tell them? That I met someone strong, someone brave, someone who reminded me how to live. Ethan met her eyes. That I am not alone anymore, and that I am grateful. Grace felt warmth spread through her chest. I am grateful too. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan spoke again. Grace, I need to tell you something. She turned to face him fully. His expression was serious. When you first came here, I saved you because it was the right thing to do. Because I could not let another person die. He paused. But now it is different. Different how? Ethan took a breath. You have become important to me, not just as a partner in work, as a person. Grace's heart began to beat faster. I care about you, Ethan continued, more than I have cared about anyone since Anna died. And I needed you to know that. He held up a hand. I am not asking for anything, not expecting anything. You have been through hell, and you deserve time to heal, to figure out who you are without someone else defining you. I just wanted you to know that you matter to me, that having you here has made my life better, richer, worth living again. Grace stared at him, this man who had given her everything and asked for nothing. She thought about her life before, the fear, the violence, the constant running. She thought about Corbin's words. And in doing so, he had given her something that she had never had before, something that she had never even dreamed of, something that she had never even imagined, something that she had never even dared to hope for. And in doing so, he had given her something she had never had before, the ability to choose her own path. Ethan, she said softly, you are important to me too. She reached out, took his hand. You saved my life. But more than that, you taught me I was worth saving. You showed me what honor looks like, what strength looks like, what a good man looks like. She squeezed his hand. I am not ready for everything. Not yet. The wounds are still too fresh. But I am ready for this, for partnership, for friendship, for building a life together. And maybe someday for more. Ethan smiled. The real smile, the one that reached his eyes. Someday is enough, more than enough. They sat together as the stars came out, hands linked, watching the valley settle into night. Two people who had found each other in violence and stayed for peace. Two people who were learning to live again. Autumn came with a burst of color. The aspens turned gold, their leaves shimmering in the sunlight. The air grew crisp and cool. Geese flew overhead in long V formations heading south. Grace and Ethan harvested their garden-preserving vegetables for the winter. They sold cattle in town, making good profit. The ranch was thriving. One afternoon, Grace rode into town alone. It was the first time she had been there since the battle. People recognized her. Some stared, some whispered, but many approached her with smiles and thanks. The shopkeeper gave her extra supplies at no charge. For what you did for those children, he said. The minister stopped her on the street. Would you come speak at the church, he asked. Share your story. It might give hope to others who feel lost. Grace was not sure about that, but she promised to think about it. In the general store, she found what she was looking for, a small wooden box beautifully carved. She purchased it along with her other supplies. That evening, she gave it to Ethan. He opened it to find a photograph, one she had commissioned in town. It showed Grace and Ethan standing in front of the cabin, the mountains rising behind them. So you will remember, Grace said, this moment, this life we are building. Ethan looked at the photograph for a long time, then set it on the mantel next to the old photograph of Anna and Samuel. Two lives, he said quietly, one that ended, one that is beginning. He turned to Grace. Thank you for helping me start again. Grace nodded understanding. They were both starting again, building new lives from the ashes of the old. And for the first time in years, both of them had hope. Winter returned, but it was different this time. The cabin was warm and well-stocked. The cattle were healthy. Grace and Ethan were prepared. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading, talking, playing chess on a board Martha had given them. Grace taught Ethan some Chinese words her mother had taught her. He taught her songs from his childhood. They were comfortable together now. The wariness had faded. The distance had closed. One night during a heavy snowfall, they sat together on the rug in front of the fire. Grace was wrapped in the quilt the children had made. Ethan was repairing a piece of tack. Do you ever regret it? Grace asked suddenly, taking me and fighting Corbin. Ethan looked up from his work. Never, not for a second. Even though you almost died, especially because of that. He set the tack aside. For 5 years, I was not really living, just existing, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live again, a purpose, something worth fighting for. He met her eyes. How could I regret that? Grace was quiet for a moment, then spoke. I thought I had lost who I was, she said quietly, touching the embroidered dragon. That Corbin had destroyed the person my mother wanted me to be. But you helped me remember. Ethan moved closer to her on the rug, not touching, but near. Your mother was right about the dragon. I could see it in you even when you were half frozen in the snow, even when you were broken and beaten. It was always there. Grace looked at him, really looked at him, this strong, gentle man who had become her anchor. And she realized something. She loved him. Not the desperate love of need, not the obsessive love Corbin had demanded, but the quiet, steady love of partnership, of respect, of choosing someone day after day because being with them made life better. She was not ready to say it out loud yet. The wounds were still too fresh, the fear of vulnerability still too strong. But she felt it, and that was enough. "Ethan," she said softly. "Yes, thank you for everything." He smiled. "You are welcome, for everything." They sat together as the fire burned low and the snow fell outside. Two people who had survived the winter, who would survive many more winters together. Two people who had found in each other a reason to keep living. Spring came again. Grace stood on the hillside looking down at the valley. The snow was melting. The streams were running. New life was beginning. Ethan came up behind her, stood beside her when, "Another year," he said. "Another beginning," Grace replied. They looked out at the land they had built together, the expanded cabin, the growing herd, the fences and gardens and all the markers of a life well lived. "What do you want to do this year?" Ethan asked. Grace thought about all the possibilities now open to her, about the freedom she had fought so hard to win. "I want to meet more of the families," she said, "the ones we saved. I want to know their stories. Make sure they are truly safe and happy. I want to expand the ranch, maybe hire some help, build something that will last beyond just us." She paused. "And I want to learn everything I missed while working for Corbin, how to read better, how to write, how to be a part of a community instead of hiding from it." Ethan nodded. "Those are good goals." "What about you?" Grace asked. "I want to keep building with you, keep learning who I am now instead of who I was." He looked at her. "And I want to be here for you, however you need me to be." Grace turned to face him fully. The morning sun lit his face, making his eyes shine. "I need you to be exactly who you are," she said. "My partner, my friend." She hesitated, then added quietly, "And maybe someday something more." Ethan's breath caught. "Grace, I am not ready yet," she said quickly. "Not for everything, but I am ready to try, to see where this path leads." She took his hand. "If you are willing to wait, to be patient while I figure out who I am without fear." Ethan brought her hand to his lips, kissed it gently. "I will wait as long as you need, forever if that is what it takes." Grace smiled, a real smile full of warmth and hope. "Not forever," she said. "Just a little while longer." They stood together on the hillside, hands linked, watching the valley come alive with spring. Below them, the cabin stood solid and strong, a fortress that had protected them, a home that had sheltered them, and now a foundation for whatever future they would build together. Two survivors who had become partners. Two warriors who had found peace. Two broken people who had learned to live again. Together, the mountains stood silent and eternal, watching over them. The valley stretched out green and new. The sky was endless and blue. And Grace Chen, who had been lost and broken and afraid, stood in the sunlight with hope in her heart. She was home. She was free. She was alive. And for the first time in her life, that was enough.